Welcome back. The U.S. Department of Justice taking the Department of Corrections to court over the state of Georgia's prisons.
The federal agency has been investigating conditions in the state's prisons due to spikes in violence, including murder, suicide, and assaults. Jessica Cha met with a family whose son died behind bars and tells us that they're still searching for answers.
The U.S. Justice Department took Georgia's Department of Corrections to court last week. They say the state refuses to hand over documents they've requested in their investigation, which includes information like how many inmates have been murdered. Marcus Pearson Sr. and his family say that they still have yet to receive any details on how their son died.
Last thing I look at and the first thing I see in the morning.
Marcus Pearson Sr.'s son, Marcus Jr., was an inmate at Telfair State Prison. Pearson says his son was a good kid who'd love to make people laugh. He was serving time for armed robbery and was a year away from release when he died 2 years ago.
He was found in his dorm unresponsive due to an altercation with another inmate.
Prison officials told Pearson that his son died from blunt force trauma, but his autopsy report shows that he died from stab wounds. He says he hasn't heard from the prison in 2 years about their investigation.
That's my junior. My first born son. It was like somebody sticking their hand in your chest and pulling your heart out.
Pearson and his family just want answers to how his son died. U.S. Attorney Peter Leary says the federal investigation will look into whether Georgia's prisons are safe.
The safety and welfare of incarcerated individuals as well as prison guards is of utmost importance, and we want to make sure we're protecting people's civil rights while they're serving their time.
Pearson says he feels the state prison system swept his son's death under the rug and wishes it could be handled more seriously. In Macon, Jessica Cha, 13 WMAZ News.
Georgia Department of Corrections sent us a statement saying they have been working together with the Justice Department.
But they say federal officials are asking for confidential information that could threaten the safety of staff and inmates.
What's up, family? How y'all doing? It's your Diva in Knowledge. Lady Mocha representing Mocha's Cafe de Paris. Well, I'm always going to serve you the truth and break you off with a slice of knowledge. What's up, family? Well, as y'all can see in the clip that I had just presented to y'all, here is a father who has come forth stating that he has been reaching out to Telfair State Prison about the unlawful death of his son. Mr. Marcus Pearson says he feels that the state prison system swept his son's death under the rug and wishes it could be handled more seriously. So, of course, this is one of those type of circumstances in which not too many people sympathize when it comes to criminal offenders. I mean, don't get me wrong. Most of the time when a person is incarcerated, we automatically feel that that person put themselves in that situation to have to be incarcerated to begin with. So whenever it comes to talking about criminal offenders, the sympathy is rarely there, if not any at all. Because again, a lot of these individuals have already been perceived as a nuisance to society. In other words, they're not productive citizens. They're not complying with the laws of the land. So therefore, anytime an individual is locked up or incarcerated, it's automatically that notion that they deserve it. That's what they get. You know, they broke the law. They violated the law. Therefore, we should lock you up and throw away the key. However, even with that being said, inmates have to be treated like human beings, unfortunately, even if they are child molesters, even if they are murderers, you know, even if they are rapists. Unfortunately, inmates, regardless of their crimes, regardless of their criminal history, they have rights. And that's just the way it is. Regardless of your personal feelings, regardless of how you perceive them, inmates are still human beings. They're not supposed to be treated like animals. They're not supposed to be treated like savages, even though in many cases it's warranted based on the things that they have done on the outside, which has caused them to get incarcerated in the first place. So with that being said, I thought it was imperative that I spoke upon this because, as most of you know who have been following me, I have been a correctional officer for 3 years. And although no longer I am part of the correctional system as far as an officer, I still have a strong passion and desire for criminal justice, because I just feels like There's so much unfairness and so much injustice when it comes to victims. Also, when it comes to those who try to serve the law professionally, such as officers, police officers, correctional officers. Everybody plays a part in as far as doing what they're supposed to do to make sure situations like this don't occur too often. So as we know, we have this young man here named Mr. Marcus Pearson, who was incarcerated in the Telfair State Prison, which is located in the state of Georgia. Now, from what I can tell, after doing my research, this is most likely Marcus Pearson's first time being incarcerated. Usually, whenever an individual has been incarcerated for the first time by law, in most cases, they normally don't have a record for you to pull off the Department of Corrections site, where you can usually go and put in that inmate's information. You put in their correctional institution number, their inmate number, their first name, their last name. But if this is their first time committing this type of offense, most of the time they don't have a record for them with their actual picture. So I was not able to retrieve Mr. Pearson's record, unfortunately, because I'm assuming he's a first-time offender. Usually first-time offenders, they don't have records of them. So nevertheless, Mr. Pearson was incarcerated for robbery due to his father stating he's a good kid. And we all know parents always feel like they have the good child regardless of what they have done, regardless of how many times they've been in and out of jail. You just have parents that just don't see any wrong in their children. Now, it could be when he's implied that his son is a good kid, meaning that he never personally had problems with him. Maybe his son never talked back to him, never disrespected him, never raised up on him. But at the same time, his son was going out here committing criminal offenses against other people who didn't deserve it, who became victims to his crime. So it depends on how you perceive it. As a parent, you may not feel like your child is bad if your child has not done anything personally to you, but it doesn't equate or take away from the fact that your son, as well as your daughter, because we also have women that are incarcerated as well, they have violated a law which has caused somebody to suffer. A victim, a business, whatever they have done, it impacted the victim, regardless of what. So, although my heart goes out to Mr. Pearson as a father, at the same time, me being a productive citizen, I very well could have very well ended up a victim. You know what I mean? So, his son, committed a criminal act. And unfortunately, anybody could have fell prey to becoming one of his victims. So, nevertheless, what's going on is that Mr. Pearson here, he was attacked by two inmates who entered inside of his cell within the correctional facility where he was currently incarcerated. And basically, based on the reports that have been surfacing, they said that the inmate, Mr. Pearson, he suffered from blunt trauma, but it's basically being stated that that wasn't the actual case, that he had some stab wounds after an autopsy was done, that he sustained after an altercation with an inmate. So he was pronounced dead by Telfair County coroner at the prison around 8:15 p.m. Now this happened on Friday night when Mr. Pearson got into a physical altercation with another inmate. Of course, Georgia Department of Corrections is still investigating the death in conjunction with the GBI as a suspected homicide. Pearson was sentenced to serve 20 years in 2008 in Bibb County for armed robbery. Okay, so he had been in there for 2000, since he's been in there since 2008, and he got murdered 2 years ago. So yeah, he did like 12 years. So I guess he was going to do the rest on paper from the looks of it. So he had about 12 or 13 years. And most likely, many times when these inmates get these type of offenses, for instance, if they give them 20 years, they may tell them, well, you got to do 15 and then the other 5 is on paper. Or you do 10, other 10 is on paper. So basically what it sounds like to me, that's pretty much what they were doing. They were going to let him have to do the other 3 or 4 years on paper. So basically that's what happened. Now, me being a former correctional officer, in many instances when inmates get into physical altercations, it's usually over one or several things. First thing is, sometimes the inmates, they owe debts. They owe debts, and this is the reason why when a lot of these offenders, these individuals will enter inside the facility, I would always tell them, do not make bets, do not gamble inside these facilities, and you owe somebody money and you don't pay up, because these dudes, they take debts seriously. These dudes are worse than child support. They're worse than student loans. They are worse than any type of loan company that you could think of. When you owe them money, you owe them any type of collection. If that inmate looked out for you and gave you food from his commissary when you didn't have anything, he allowed you to make a phone call off his prepaid account. Any favors these inmates do for you and you don't follow up, you don't pay it back, and they get the word that you're going to be leaving or you're getting transferred to another unit, and you're not giving them any incentive that you're going to pay it back, they are going to retaliate. I've seen it one time where there was a particular inmate, him and his cellie was looking out for him. His cellie had let him commissary, was giving him trades, doing all kind of things for him. Now, what was the deal in return? I don't know if the inmate owed it to him to give him a sexual favor, because that happens too, or to pay him back when he gets his commissary, whatever. All of a sudden, when it's close to commissary day, which would be on Thursday, this dude decides that he wants to be removed out of the unit. Now, keep in mind, usually inmates who owe money or they owe a debt, they will intentionally act out or do things, or either they will walk past the red line just so they can be removed to another unit. Because either they beefing with somebody in there and they're afraid of that person, they don't want to fight them, or again, they owe some money. So in this case, that wasn't really the case. They had to remove this particular inmate because there was a certain unit he needed to be placed in for whatever reason. The inmate did not request this because he was trying to get away from paying the debt or he was beefing with somebody. This was a decision that the facility had made. The inmate didn't look at it that way. The inmate looked at it like, oh, really? You trying to dip on me? You trying to leave? You trying to get transferred out of here? Well, you owe me some money. So when I say he beat the brakes off this inmate, I almost thought he was dead because this guy was totally unconscious. He beat the living daylights out of this frail white guy who couldn't have weighed no more than $130. And this dude was a big black guy, every bit of 220, 230, and he beat the brakes off him to the point they had to send him to the hospital. Now, keep in mind, most prisons, most jails, they don't send inmates to the hospital just because your pinky hurts. First of all, they don't like to waste money. So whenever they have to send an inmate out to a hospital, to an emergency room, that inmate was in serious trouble with his health, with his well-being. So he darn near beat him to death. So they had to send this inmate to the ER. Now, of course, granted, the inmate that attacked him, he will get another charge added on to what he was initially already there for. But hell, if you got an inmate in there that's already in there for murder, that's facing 20, 30 years, what the hell is another 10 to 5 years to them? You get what I'm saying? So anyway, we know how that go. But anyhow, as inmates who get themselves in physical altercation like this, like I said, either they owe some money or either they ran their mouth too much, letting other inmates know they don't have long to get out. Now, you have some of these inmates who know they're never going to get out. They'll never see daylight. They will never, ever see the outside world. And anytime they encounter other inmates who they know eventually will have the privilege to go home and be around their loved ones, sometimes this infuriates them. It infuriates them, especially, some of these young inmates, they like to brag. Yeah, man, when I get out, I'm going to do this. I'm going to get back to the studio. I'm going to get my home built. You're rubbing it kind of, in other inmates' face about your freedom that you're so close to getting. And then in the meantime, these guys, they're looking at 30, 40 years. They're never going to see daylight unless it's going to be through the windows of their cells. So you have these young guys or these, cocky inmates who like to brag about going home to their family instead of keeping it low key, not saying anything. You know what I mean? These guys, sometimes they get mad, they get in the feeling, they get in their feelings. And again, don't owe them no money. Don't be beefing with them, because at this point in time, they're looking at you're going to have your freedom. So if they got to make sure they got with a bang, and meaning physically assaulting you where you go home beat up and bruised, or in the worst case scenario like this, actually taking your life so your family and your loved ones will never see you again. So like Mr. Pearson stated, his son only had a little bit of time left to go, had like a year. And 9 times out of 10, he probably was running his mouth, bragging about how he was going to get out, or he probably wasn't bragging, probably just mentioned it. Yeah, man, I got like a year left, this and that, and again, a lot of these guys, they can be more emotional than women. They get petty, they get in their feelings, they get emotional, and they don't want to see nobody else be great. They don't want somebody else being able to have the privilege of going home to their family, and they know they will never, ever have that same fate for them. So it was either one or the other, or either he snitched. And this happens a lot in these correctional facilities, as much as these guys. That is definitely like jail code. Do not snitch, even if you didn't do anything wrong. And sometimes some of these guys, they very gullible. They don't know the street code. They don't respect, the jail code of not snitching, not ratting other inmates out to other officers. Now, if you rat on another officer, they don't care about that. But if you're an inmate and you ratting on other inmates, let me tell you something. That will get you demolished quicker than anything. And a lot of these young guys, and they'll do that. They will snitch, throw somebody on the bus. And some of these old heads, the old heads, they're just more slick about how they snitch. These young guys, they don't know how to play it off. They make it seem obvious. Every time you leave out your cell and go into the counselor office every other day, you're going to start looking suspect. These guys are paying attention. They're noticing. Every time you turn around, you're talking to an officer. You're pulling the officer aside, and they seeing you do it every day. These guys going to start looking at you like you the suspect snitch, especially when all of a sudden the other inmates are getting removed out the unit. All of a sudden, every time you go speak to somebody, you come back, after a while, you going to draw attention to yourself, because these guys got all day to pay attention to that. So several factors could have led to this young man's demise as to why he ended up, getting physically assaulted inside the jail facility, which led to his untimely death, especially when he only had a year. Now, the other thing I would say, a lot of these correctional facilities, they do not care about inmates. They do not care about inmates. Now, I know usually when it comes to this, a lot of people saying, well, yeah, they're inmates. They're rapists, they're murderers, they're child molesters. You're not supposed to care. That's true to a degree. However, it is still your job to protect and keep inmates safe from possibly being injured or harmed, in most cases killed by other inmates. You have to provide security and safety to the best of your ability. Now, when I seen this video, notice there was no officers around. Well, I'm not going to be able to put the clip in, but from what I can gather, when I saw, because YouTube sometimes is funny when you put in certain video clips or whatever. But from what I can gather, there was not enough adequate staffing. And we all know this is the number one factor. I have addressed this to y'all many a times in a lot of my content videos when I talk about corrections. There is never enough of staff. And these inmates are smart. They know it. It's 70 of them, and it's only one officer in the wing. You cannot keep your eyes on all 70 inmates. It's impossible. And sometimes a lot of these prisons and these correctional institutions, they are cheapskates. They don't want to put in the extra money to get extra bodies. They don't want to up the pay. Y'all want to charge what officers $18, $20 an hour when people working at the warehouse getting $22 an hour, and they ain't dealing with half the stress and half the headaches, and their safety is not near as much in a high risk factor compared to working in a correctional facility with a bunch of knuckleheads, thieves, murderers, whatever. So there's never enough of staff because, again, they're not paying enough, and the officers that are there, they are burning them out, and they are constantly overworked. They're overworked. All of this excessive mandated overtime, it becomes overwhelming, becomes too much. So what ends up happening is officers start getting sloppy. They're not as attentive. It's pretty much like, shit, I'm just here for a paycheck. I'm not breaking my neck going after every inmate that has every complaint about an inmate that's threatening them. So in some cases, sometimes you have these inmates, they try to do the right thing. They don't want no drama. They don't want to be in no conflict. I've had inmates come to me and said, "Officer so-and-so, can you please remove me out of here because I'm not trying to get in a fight. Only got 5 months left, only got 6 months left. This dude is trying me. He done did this, he done did that, he done stole my commissary. I have reported this to the other officers. None of them ain't doing nothing. If you don't remove me, I'm going to cut up. I'm going to fight." And you know what? It's been times when I will have inmates come to me. I will call my upper staff, my commander, let them know what's going on. You know what they'll tell me? Well, let them fight. Because it's sad, but because of so many inmates, and there's so many inmates who are manipulative and they'll make up stuff just so they can be removed. It's kind of like these prisoners are not trying, these correctional facilities, these prisons are not trying to be proactive. They rather wait till shit happens. That way they know it's real. Then they'll intervene. And me personally, I don't like that it has to be done in that manner. I'm like this: if an inmate is coming to you and saying this, that, and the third is going on, let's remove them to diffuse the situation, right? Makes perfect sense. We can't always do that because these inmates are so slick, conniving, and manipulative. They will sit up there and make up something and say, well, me and this dude beefing. They see 1 or 2 inmates got removed based off of false lies about where I'm beefing with this inmate, blah, blah, blah. It becomes repetitive. Then you'll turn around, you'll have several inmates coming to you doing the same thing. Well, I'm beefing with so-and-so. I need to be removed. Well, so-and-so stole my coffee. So-and-so. When they see 1 or 2 inmates getting granted that, it's going to get out of control. So I get it. But at the same time, it's bad for the inmates who really want to do their time peacefully. But it doesn't work that way, right? So, nevertheless, you know, you have these inmates who already have no regards for the law, no respect for the law. So whatever they did on the outside to cause themselves to get incarcerated to begin with, they're not going to change just because they're incarcerated. They're still not going to have respect for the law, meaning the correctional officers that are there. They're still not going to respect the policies and procedures no more than they did not respect the laws outside of the prison in the civilian world. So again, you know, you have all of this going on in the prisons. The staff is overworked. You got inmates trying to run game. So even if the inmate really is in trouble, it's like the boy who cried wolf. You know, you don't know if to believe it or not. So because of this, you know, a lot of these correctional institutions, they are consistently overwhelmed. It's just not enough of bodies to deal with these issues. It's not enough of staff. And the upper management, they can care less because they are not the ones that are in the dungeon. meaning they're not in the actual jail part of the jail part that houses the inmates. They sitting up front in the admin office drinking, $10 cappuccinos, talking about going golfing, talking about going to Ruth Chris. These uppity upper management personnel, they don't have to deal with the shitty part of it. The only time they deal with it is in situations like this. The inmate is dead, it's all over the news and being publicized. Now you get their attention. Now they got to help the GBI investigate. They got to interview the different inmates, the officers that was there. And if that officer was scratching a behind at the time or whatever, and they find out they wasn't doing their runs, now they want to terminate. Now they want to fire. Again, these jails, these prisons, they're not proactive. They're reactive. They only deal with stuff when it happens or after it already is done. They don't try to put a prevention plan to prevent it from happening in the first place. So things like this happen. So again, we have this father. He has been reaching out to the prison, Mr. Pearson, for 2 years. They're giving him the runaround. They're not trying to give him an answer. And this is how it works in a lot of cases. Honestly, these correctional institutions, they don't care about inmates and they don't care about staff. As an inmate, you are on your own. As a correctional officer, you are on your own. Now, they'll step in and intervene when the heat gets turned up or if they feel like the officer is in danger. Other than that, you are by yourself walking amongst 70 individuals. Some of them mental health, some of them, high-risk criminals that shouldn't even be housed amongst general population. But some of these facilities are so lazy with how they with their classification. They so badly want to get these inmates off their hands. Instead of, for instance, if Unit 2 is with a lot of mental institutionalized inmates with mental illnesses that would be of harm to inmates and staff. Let's say if that unit is full, here it is, you got 2 of them who done came in off the street who are already categorized as mental illness. Because y'all are too lazy to keep them in booking or to keep them in cell isolated, y'all so badly want to hurry up and get them off y'all hands, y'all will put them in general population with other inmates who are not near as crazy. Got to sleep, share cells with these type of individuals. I get inmates who come to me, I know this guy, something's wrong with him. Why do y'all have him housed with me? Well, inmates Johnson, truth be told, I don't make that decision. They brought him in my unit and I was just told I have to house him with someone. I don't have any other empty cells. You are the only inmate that is by yourself. I cannot stick him anywhere else. All of the other cells are full. You get a lot of inmates that get frustrated. They get an attitude because they're comfortable being by themselves. And you got some inmates, as long as nobody's in the same cell with them, they're cool, they chill, they don't give you no problems, they don't bother you, they chill. But as an officer, sometimes it takes you out your element because you don't want to put another cellie in this person's cell because you know this inmate don't give you no problems. You don't want to change the climate because it's all about making sure your shift is smooth sailing for 12 hours. But what tends to happen is, again, just like they don't give a damn about the inmates, they don't give a damn about the staff. They put you in a position where you got to be the one to take these guys out of their comfort zone, and you got to put somebody in their cell that's possibly mentally ill. Also, jail is jail. It's not about appeasing the inmate. It's not about making the inmate comfortable. It's about just placing them somewhere until it's time for them to get sentenced or shift off, till they see the court, till they go to the judge, till they get sent off to their prison. It's all about just housing them. So that's why it's very important as parents we prepare our children for reality when they get themselves in these type of situations, because prison is not a safe place. Regardless of, it's the officer's job to protect the inmates. Officers can't be in the same place 24/7. You have inmates again that prove to be high risk factors, that are violent, that are hardcore criminals. These individuals, they'll throw them in general population with inmates that might be in there for simple theft or probation violation. So they're more of a threat to the lightweight inmates that aren't considered a major threat to society. So as a parent, I understand this guy's frustration that his son was attacked, and the prison, they're not trying to relieve him, give him an answer. They're not trying to let him know that they're working on it, that they're looking into it. They keep saying the same thing over and over. We're working on it. We're looking into it. And they ain't looking into anything unless you got some big money where you could afford a lawyer to jump on it right away. There's not too much you can do. And it's unfortunate that I don't think there's a clause been made yet that if inmate has if an inmate's death has been caused by negligence, meaning there wasn't enough officers to conduct security check, to possibly have ran into the situation and prevent it, or the one officer that was there was not doing their security checks regularly, got lazy, sloppy. I mean, until they come up with a clause that inmates that have been physically attacked or physically injured due to the negligence of the jail, I don't think it's going to change. I'm sure if that was a clause and more families could start suing and doing lawsuits, these jails and these prisons, they will be more mindful. I bet you they'll stop being cheap and they'll put more officers in these wings. So it's not so much one officer that's stressed out having to babysit 65 to 70 grown men. Again, these prisons, these jails, they are cheap. They try to cut corners. They hire just enough people. And the people they hire, they got to keep burning them out. When officers get burned out, what do? They calling out. They're not showing up. They quitting. Or they're so exhausted and tired from working, they neglect their duties and get fired. So, there's no structure. There's no real organization when it comes to these type of facilities. They will not deal with things head on. They don't care about these inmates, and that's why I'm letting anybody know, if you're going to commit a crime, please keep in mind you end up in prison or in jail. All of your protection is gone, because these correctional facilities, they are not going to accommodate you as an inmate. To them, you're just another number. Now, these correctional facilities, they don't mind profiting, because every inmate, every individual that enters that facility, that's another paycheck that's being offered to the state. They get paid. They earn revenue for every inmate that enters these facilities. You're just another number. They don't care about your personal issues. And the things that they should be focused on, they don't worry about it. They don't worry about, as an inmate, housing you with other inmates that are more of a threat to you. I mean, I don't even know why, if they know certain inmates only got a certain amount of time left, why not relocate them to other unit with other inmates that also don't have long? If they down to a year, why not move them or relocate them to a unit with other inmates who also don't have that much time left? It'd be less chances of fights, less chances of altercations, because all of these guys are on the same page. All of them are aware they don't have that much time left. They're not trying to make trouble for each other. Y'all just housing inmates with any and everybody, inmates who don't have nothing to lose. So I'm not sure the dynamics that played specifically on this young man's death. I don't know if he was beefing with somebody, he owed somebody some money, he was bragging about getting out soon. I'm not sure what situation specifically led to that. But what I do know is it's going to be a long time before his father gets the answer that he wants. And even though we may look at him as just another inmate, this is still somebody's son. And as a parent, we've all probably experienced our child getting locked up, and it is not always for something bad. It could be a speeding ticket, drinking alcohol under the age of 20. Everybody that's in jail, they're not in jail because they just flat out criminals. Some people just get caught up in situations and they don't use their bad judgment. But this man's father, he's going to be in agony forever. And the sad part is, I think even when they do give him an answer, it's not going to be enough to his satisfaction. They're not, I really don't believe they're going to take accountability and state that it is negligence on the state's fault of that prison, that inmate was attacked openly because there was not enough security, there was not any safety guidelines being utilized or implemented. They're not going to look out for this man's best interest. Most correctional facilities, they are going to look out for the correctional facility. Correctional facilities, they have their own lawyers, they have their own attorneys, they have their own investigators. And I just don't trust the system. I feel like when it comes to losing a loved one inside these facilities, they're going to cover their necks. And if you don't know the law, and by you not having access to entering that prison, they can change the paperwork, they can reword the incident that occurred. They have so many advantages in protecting themselves, you know what I mean? And because you're not part of that system, they can tell you anything. They can sit up there and say, oh, well, your son died from a heart attack, or your son died from suicide. You really have no way of knowing unless you got a bomb-ass lawyer that's relentless and is going to make sure they do everything they can to prove that the prison facility is at fault. Other than that, your child is just another number. But I hate to say, I really don't see him getting much justice out of this. And this is not to be a Debbie Downer, but we have to set the reality. Unfortunately, there's no way he's going to be able to prove much of anything, because his father wasn't there. They're going to go by what the paperwork is presented to them. We went from, blunt trauma to a stabbing, stab wounds. And that's another thing. The security measures in these prisons are bad. These inmates are still able to make shanks, make weapons. A lot of these facilities, they're not doing shakedowns periodically. They may do shakedowns, meaning that's when they enter into a cell and they inspect that cell for weapons. They are ransacking everything. They're checking their mattress, they're checking their sheets, they're going all in their products. Some prisons get lazy and they don't do them enough, or they don't have enough staff to do them frequently. So in many cases, these guys got plenty of times to make shanks. He was stabbed. They're not allowed to have knives in there. They didn't come with knives in there. Somebody made a weapon out of something. And if you're not doing your cell inspections regularly, that gives them a lot of time. These inmates are smart. They pay attention to stuff like that. They know there's not enough cell searches. And as long as they know that, that gives them a big advantage to not only injure inmates, but they could injure staff. Hell, whoever killed this young man, they could have very well used that same shank to kill a killer officer. The officer didn't want to kiss their ass that day or let them out, for tier time or whatever, because a lot of times these inmates, many of them don't have any control over their anger. The moment they can't have their way, they blowing up. They ready to physically fight or attack someone. So it's an unfortunate situation, but This is the reason why young people, please stay out of jail. Do not put yourself in a position in which you can get incarcerated or locked up. Once you are in there, no matter what is going on, you could tell your mom or daddy, you could be crying on the phone for hours, knowing somebody's out to kill you, knowing somebody out to get you. Your mom, dad, whoever can call that jail, call the facility and say, look, my son, my daughter is in danger. Could y'all please look into the situation? They're not going to take the extra initiative to look into it. They're not going to take the time to investigate anything, because you got to remember, it's probably very well over 2,000 to 3,000 inmates, sometimes 5, depending on how big the prison is. They're not going to take the time out to listen to your son's, daughter's sob stories because they locked up, and very well your son and your daughter could be telling the truth. They know their life is in danger. The word has been brought to them that somebody is waiting to catch them slipping so they can kill them, but you notifying it to the prison authorities, that does not mean they're going to take the extra initiative to protect your son or your daughter. And I hate to say it, that is part of the job as an officer. We have to secure and protect inmates. But the truth is, a lot of officers are overworked. They burnt out. They hate their job. Not only that, a lot of these officers are being overworked and underappreciated. They have other upper staff that talks to them like garbage and does not make them feel appreciative of the fact that they're coming in every day, that they're doing the extra overtime. Officers deal with a lot. They deal with combative inmates, and on top of that, they have to deal with the system that cares nothing about what they go through as officers. So on that note, I'm not really certain if Mr. Pearson is going to get the instant results that he's looking for. It'd be by the grace of God if there's any good that comes out of this, because again, you know, these correctional facilities, they're going to cover themselves. They're going to protect their best interests more than the inmates and more than the inmate's family. So it's unfortunate that this had to occur. As I stated, he didn't have much time left to get out. But this is why I tell young people, please do not put yourself in a position in which you will become incarcerated, because once you're in there, your family cannot protect you. You no longer belong to your family. You belong to the state. You become state property. So anyway, nevertheless, you know, hopefully in due time, he'll get some type of answer to what has occurred with his son. But nevertheless, y'all, leave y'all comment below. Let me know what y'all think of the situation. What do you think about Mr. Pearson saying his son is a good son? You know, he didn't deserve what happened to him. Do you think he's speaking from a parent, the narrative of being his parent? Or do you feel like this particular individual was already, you know, a nuisance to society, that he kind of brought this upon himself? Do you think inmates even deserve to be protected, even if they've done something very heinous or they committed such you know, a severe criminal act? Do you think they deserve protection? What is y'all opinion below? Anyway, this your girl Diva and Knowledge, Lady Mocha, represent Mocha's Cafe de Padres. So I'm always serving you wisdom, knowledge, and spiritual awareness. Talk to you soon. Bye.